get a fast car. I want a ticket to anywhere. Maybe we make a deal. Maybe together we can get somewhere. Any place is better. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. Maybe we'll make something. Me, myself, I got nothing to prove. You get a fast car. I got a plan to get us out of here. Been working at the convenience store. Managed to save just a little bit of money. Won't have to drive too far. Just cross the border and into the city. You and I can both get jobs and finally see what it means to be living. See, my old man's got a problem. Yeah, but the bottle, that's the way it is. He says his body's too old for working. His body's too young to look like his. My mama went off and left him. She wanted more from life than he could give. I said somebody's got to take care of him. So I quit school and that's what I did. You got a fast car. Is it fast enough so we can fly away? We gotta make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way. So I remember when we were driving in your car. Speed so fast I felt like I was drunk. City lights day out before us, and your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. Had a feeling I could be someone, be someone, be someone. You got a fast car. We go cruise and entertain ourselves. Still ain't got a job. Now work in the market as a checkout girl. I know things will get better. You'll find work and I'll get promoted. We'll move out of the shelter, buy a bigger house and live in the suburbs. So I remember when we were driving in your car. Speed so fast it felt like I was drunk. City lights lay out before us, and your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. Had a feeling I could be someone, be someone, be someone.
Alright, hello guys. I hope you enjoyed the intro music. I was going to do 60s today, but I was like, I kind of forgot about it, and it was like 20 minutes before, and I was just like, I don't even know any 60 songs, so we're going to push that off. So, yeah, we went back to, I believe this is the 90s. I believe. Not 100% sure on that, but, yeah. Hi, Matthew. How are you? How's everybody doing in chat? The hot take, this song is overrated? No, the remakes of this song are overrated. They are not good, as I should say. This version, the original version, is fantastic. Hi, Peggy, or PK. Hi, Cannibal. How are you? Yes, the Cannibal is a mod, and Cannibal, he will eat you if you misbehave. It's been played to hell the past couple of years, Tommy, but I still enjoy it. Give Me One Reason is a better Chapman song. Fair enough. Hi, April. Hi, BH. How are you? Hi, Tommy. I don't remember much of A Clash of Kings. Well, this is going to be a refresher for at least the first half. I kind of did this for a Game of Thrones, I believe, as well, where I would kind of give you guys updates on where we're at in the reread and just take a step back and look at it and, you know, tell us, like, give my reactions on the reread. Because rereading it to the extent that I do is very different than you rereading it, maybe. Like, I go through an episode multiple times, right? So if you guys see, like, episode, I don't even remember what episode is coming out. I think it's like episode 36 or 35 is coming out tomorrow, which is going to be Bran 5. I quite literally read Bran 5, then I type up all my notes, basically reading it again, or sometimes I plug it in. Well, more than likely, after the first read, I just take the pages and have it bullet pointed down for me for the script on ChatGPT, so it just kind of bullet points it for me, which is nice. But go through it a second time, because I also got to I got to read over what ChatGPT is giving me to make sure it's accurate and all that stuff, and then I got to put my stuff into it. But second time, third time, I then edit it. So 3 times. So depending on how much work I go into an episode, I go through one chapter 3 to 4 times. So it's very different than somebody that maybe just casually reading it, all that kind of stuff. So we're now a little over halfway. We're actually probably about 60% of the way through the book. And I think A Clash of Kings, for me, it is my favorite book. It's kind of stayed where I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of great chapters in it. Clash of Kings is very different to me than a Game of Thrones, where Game of Thrones clearly is more of a natural story, right? Like its best chapters, its best climaxes, all that stuff is more backloaded. It's more towards the end of the story. Like for me, the best chapter of the book is the last chapter. There's great chapters all throughout the ending, whether it's Rob's storyline, Jon's storyline, Ned's storyline, Arya, Sansa, like they all progress and get better as the book goes on. And there is a couple outliers, like Robert and Ned when they're talking about killing Daenerys. Like there are outliers, but Clash of Kings is very different than Game of Thrones. The world starts to expand. We have a bit more different plot lines. And the weird thing about Clash of Kings is, for some POVs, they stay as a prominent POV, and others kind of fade into the background. So for the first half of A Clash of Kings, characters like Daenerys and Jon, who had a good amount of chapters, Daenerys, I think, was third in chapters in book 1, she fades into the background, right? There's only 2 chapters for her throughout the first 36 or so. She much more is backloaded. Like she has 3 chapters in the second half of Clash of Kings, which still isn't a lot, given she had 10 chapters in the first book. Jon, for instance, up to this point is not a very big POV. We've only seen him a couple times at the Wall, at White Tree, and then Craster's Keep, and then the Fist. That is his arc throughout the first half of the book. So you have certain characters that kind of fade to the background, and other characters that become more prominent. Tyrion goes from a character that is about average in terms of chapters to the dominant POV of the book, especially alongside of Arya. Arya and Tyrion are really our main POVs throughout the first half of the book. Now, Arya doesn't have as many chapters in the second half. Tyrion still has a lot. He continues to be a dominant POV throughout the entire book, but specifically in the first half, Arya is a character that we're with a lot. Her journey from King's Landing to where she ends up at Harrenhal is a dominant focus of the first half of the book. I believe she has 6 chapters in for her. That's a lot. That's a lot for it just being the first half of the book. That's like almost Ned Stark levels. Ned would have probably been around 10 chapters around midway through a Game of Thrones. And then also, you introduce Theon as a new POV into the story, like PK said, which I think Theon is a really good POV because George implements Theon very subtly, right? He doesn't have a dominant, storyline in this book. He is very much in the back burners to all the other things going on. He only has 2 chapters early on in the story for A Clash of Kings. They're both pretty good chapters. Like, I don't think either one is like one of the best of the series, but I think it goes a long way of exploring the Ironborn. A lot of things that set up Feast for Crows' plotline comes from Theon in his brief chapter, or not brief, he has a pretty long chapters actually, but in his chapters that he has, we gain a lot of that. And it's a nice switch up because it's still involved with the War of the Five Kings, but it's also like way different, right? And what works with Theon compared to characters like, say, Bran, Jon, and Daenerys in this book is that Theon is directly related to the plot of the War of the Five Kings. Bran, really not until Theon actually gets to Winterfell is he all that relevant in terms of what's going on in the broader sense. Now, we'll talk about each plot line, each character as a whole, where I'm kind of at with them right now, the strengths, weaknesses of the book, and all of that stuff. Maybe even some stuff that I think that on my reread has surprised me, or maybe things that I'm, getting a little bit maybe more positive about or negative about. I will say so far Clash of Kings has not been as surprising as the Game of Thrones was. A Game of Thrones, I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed Daenerys' plotline. There isn't like a plot line in this book right now that has that feeling, and maybe A Clash of Kings it's my favorite book, so I remember it a lot more. I already have like what kind of plot lines I really enjoy because it is my favorite book, so we'll just have to see. Um, I thought Game of Thrones is more memorable. I think for most people, Game of Thrones is going to be more memorable because it's the start of the story. Remember, Clash of Kings is really the bridge, right? So the first book is you're starting up, it's you getting to the bridge. And then once you get past the bridge, which the bridge is book 2, you're then on your payoff. So book 3 is a payoff. Book 3 pays off everything that was set up in book 2 and 1 for the most part. And so a lot of people are going to remember book 1 and book 3 a lot more than book 2 because book 2 is a lot of the journeying or the build up. A lot of the payoffs in the best moments of book 2 are not like big battles or big political, I don't know, like battles more or less. Like my favorite chapters of A Clash of Kings a lot of times revolve around conversations about internal conflicts. That's a lot more about what A Clash of Kings is about. Game of Thrones also kind of has a similar beat, except Game of Thrones just has really big twists that are like political motivated or big, huge victories in battle. I know Battle of Blackwater happens in Clash of Kings, but even though it is a height of the book, and I really do love the Battle of Blackwater, it's not my favorite chapters. But book 1, you have a growing up arc. It's very much about characters figuring out who they are and growing up, and that's a lot of that is paid off at the end of the book. So I think a lot of people would also remember Game of Thrones much more than A Clash of Kings. I do like Arya's chapters. I think April Arya is one of the stronger POVs of the book, and not just because she has a lot of POV chapters. I think that George was telling a very interesting story with Arya, because now that we look back on the series, it's very easy to go, oh, well, there's so many characters that introduce us and look at the Riverlands or wherever they're going and how war has shaped the country, how it's affecting the small folk. At this point, right where we're at, we've had so many POVs now that have done that. You kind of forget that Arya was really our introduction from George into that. Because in book 1, we don't really see the war, on the ground. We see it from the High Lords, the High Ladies, all that kind of stuff. We don't really see it from a point of view that's in the Riverlands who is being, forced away from their home or their families being killed. Arya is really our introduction into that. And so I really love a lot of what George is doing with the theming around Arya, like the landscape, the plot going on around her. But then I also love her as a character in book 2 because she has a very clear arc. It's kind of almost about this idea of her losing her identity, her, everything that makes her so interesting in book 1 and why so many people love her is because she is this character that feels like very adult-like, but she's also willing to say how she feels, all that stuff. She's kind of the opposite of Sansa, for instance. She reminds, for instance, Ned of Lyanna. That's how we look at Arya. And Arya, she's kind of deconstructed from that, right? To where the point of when gets to Harrenhal, she isn't that anymore. She isn't, considering herself as like a wolf. She's considering herself to be like a mouse. She doesn't have any control over her life path and trajectory at this point. So it's about her trying to then recoup that. Who is she going to be? It's kind of the big question, the looming question by the end of book 2 is, who is Arya going to be? And that's going to be determined really in the 3rd book as she's kind of gotten out of Harrenhal. But what is she going to do? Like, well, what is her trajectory after that point? Of course, she wants to get back to her family, but what is she going to do with her life? So, I really do love Arya's journey in this book as well. That's why I subbed to this channel. I remember I was looking for other Clash of King heads. Yes, Clash of Kings is fantastic. It reminds me a lot like, for instance, I love the prequels. I love the prequel era. A lot of why I love the prequels is the kind of world building that George Lucas made. I think the setting is just far more interesting than, say, the originals or the sequels. It's kind of the same way with the Clash of Kings. Like, I love the setting of the War of the Five Kings, and the Clash of Kings handles the most of the War of the Five Kings. Like, A Storm of Swords is really like the back end of it and kind of the conclusion of it. But I really do love book 2. Hi, Dakota. We are just discussing book 2. Some of my thoughts as I'm halfway through my reread of it and all of that. Also, Dakota, you didn't respond to me on Discord. I was going to allow you to pick out the song. Also, I did test the alerts, the membership and super chat stuff. It should now be good. I don't think it was on this page, but it's specifically in Streamlabs now, so hopefully it works, but we'll have to see. Clash Dany just kills the book for me. Yeah, I mean, Matthew, here's what I'll say about Dany, and the reason I don't like hate her, I don't like hate her enough to where Clash of Kings is not my favorite book. Granted, Daenerys is the weak point of this book. I'm kind of at the, which is so crazy to me because Daenerys was the POV I looked forward to the most in book 1. Book 2, you know, her first chapter is fine. It serves as a catch-up chapter. It feels kind of like an epilogue to her journey in book 1. It's still kind of handling the Dothraki arc and then building into what her arc is going to be in this book. So I actually don't mind her first chapter. It's when we get to her second chapter. Her second chapter's...
The Lannisters send their regards.
Dakota jump scared me. That spooked the shit out of me. I'm not even going to lie. What did you say? It's delayed on my laptop. Testing my dead Stark generator. Well, Dakota, it seems to have worked. So thank you for your super chat. I'm glad it works for you now. What was I saying? But yeah, so, you know, going into her second chapter in the Karth arc, the Karth arc just is boring. It just feels so isolated. Like, this is what I mean by it feels so isolated. In terms of, like, her second chapter comes very much away from her first chapter. Like, they're split by quite a big gap. You get into her second chapter, and her second chapter is really just establishing this is Karth, this is what it looks like, these are the people that are here, all of that. And then the big reveal is, oh, Robert is dead. Like, that's the big reveal for Daenerys, and that's what ends the chapter. Well, for an audience member, you know, like me reading the book, that's not a good, like, we've known this for almost, like, 3/4 of a book now, like the back end of book 1, and now the first half of the second book. She's just now realizing this. Like, it's not like it doesn't make sense, like it does. It's just that's how isolated and just Daenerys has no relevance to the plot, like in terms of what's going on in Westeros. And so, whereas in book 1, George handled that perfectly. Like, Daenerys was still a factor in the main story going on in book 1. Things that Ned and Robert were doing in book 1 had an effect on Daenerys, and Daenerys vice versa. Like, her gaining influence, becoming a Khaleesi, all this stuff like that had influence on the things going on in Westeros, Robert trying to kill her, all this stuff. Whereas here, she doesn't have really any relevance to the story outside of the House of the Undying chapter, which we haven't gotten to in the reread yet, but, you know, it has visions, it has foreshadowing to things that are going to happen in the future of the series, and also things that happen in other plot lines. But in terms of isolated feeling, Daenerys has really nothing going for her in this book. And that's really apparent in the first half. Again, we're at around 60% of the book. Daenerys only has 2 chapters. She just is not a focus of this book, and that's why I don't hate her as much to, like, say, oh, you know, she is the worst, so that makes this book not number 1 for me. It doesn't. And I think the thing with Daenerys is, even though I don't enjoy her storyline, I enjoy her as a character, which really helps. Whereas, like, when we get to characters like in A Dance with Dragons, like Quentyn, where I don't like their characters, I don't like their plot, it just becomes like, why even bother reading it? Daenerys isn't that way, because I at least really like what George does with the character of Daenerys in the first book, and even I like what he does with Daenerys as a character in book 2. The problem is she just doesn't have any really interesting characters around her. Like, the only character, like, that you really care about is Jorah. And then you get to Karth, and it's like these new characters that are brought in, and it's like, okay, it's very mysterious, right? The Warlocks, you know, Quaithe. But it's like, we're not given enough time to really develop that. Like, and they're not that interesting right off the bat. And Quaithe doesn't really get interesting until really after this arc. So it's just, you look at the characters around Daenerys in book 1 versus the characters around her in book 2. Like, book 1, she is Viserys, one of the best like characters of book 1, a great antagonist for Daenerys to kind of overcome. You have Khal Drogo, who's a very interesting progressive Khal. It's interesting to try and look at his psychology. You have a character like Miri Mazdur, another one of the most underrated characters of the entire series. You can't even really say she's like a villain. Like, she's just a complex gray character that's really interesting for Daenerys. And then you have Jorah himself, who's also kind of interesting. I would say the other characters are more interesting than Jorah, but still a decent character for Daenerys. You have Illyrio in that book. There's just a lack, I think, of a supporting cast for Daenerys in this book, and it really hurts her. She's the worst POV of this book, I think, by far. I want to see actually where I have her 2 chapters ranked. I'm pretty sure they're pretty low. Yeah, I have Daenerys' second chapter as the worst so far of the series in terms of this book. Daenerys 1 is ranked number 30 right now. So both of her chapters are in my bottom 5. So that's where I sit with Daenerys. Let's move on to another POV that I think is also very underwhelming. Jon. Jon's a weird one because Jon really gets going at the end of a Game of Thrones. His last couple of chapters is where he really starts to get going. He has a really slow start, kind of like Tyrion does in book 1, where interesting, but not as interesting as the other plotlines going on, not as interesting and developed as the other characters. They really get going. And Jon is kind of the weird one where I feel like the show handled his plotline for the first half of Jon's plotline kind of better than the book does, where the book, it just takes a while for anything to really get going. Like, there just doesn't really seem like there's this sense of urgency or any of that stuff really until the Fist of the First Men, which is where we just got to, so like midway through the book, and it took 4 chapters for Jon to really get going. And he has the same issue that Daenerys has. Jon and his plotline doesn't really have much relevance to the rest of the story, the War of the Five Kings, the main focal point of this book, at all. But the one thing that separates Jon and Daenerys is that Jon and his plotline is a little more relevant because of the idea that the wildlings are going to attack the wall at some point. That's a major factor in the War of the Five Kings. And also the other broader, bigger narrative, the overarching, enemy, the others. And that's what Jon is trying to kind of figure out with Jeor Mormont and all of that stuff. Jon is still an interesting character. He has a better supporting cast around him, like Jeor Mormont, like Samwell Tarly. Eventually we're going to get Qhorin Halfhand. He has a better setting for where he is than Daenerys. He has better characters around him than Daenerys. And so Jon is a character that I think is definitely lacking in book 2. I think it's probably his worst book. But I don't think he's like bad. Like, I don't dread reading Jon. Like, when I see a Daenerys chapter, past her first one, I'm like, it's tough to read because it's not going to be that interesting of a read. But Jon's, it's like I think is a kind of like a Game of Thrones where he has a steady buildup. Like, I think once Jon meets up with Qhorin Halfhand and he starts going on his adventure, that's when his arc starts to get really interesting. And that's where that just keeps rolling, right? Jon's arc, once he leaves the Fist of the First Men, just keeps going. He just gets better and more interesting throughout the entirety of A Storm of Swords and even Dance with Dragons. You can kind of debate which I think is the best book for Jon, either book 5 or book 3. I think both are great. But that's kind of my thoughts on Jon. Jon feels like a better version of the Dany plotline. Still isolated, but Jon just has things going for him that Daenerys does not. Bran. Bran kind of falls into the same category of like he's an isolated POV, but in terms of Bran, the thing I like the most about Bran is I do love the northern politics where we have the Harvest Feast. A lot of these lords and ladies that are not at war, they're coming to Winterfell, and we're seeing the politics for like Lady Hornwood and their lands. All of that kind of stuff is really interesting. Developing kind of the Ramsay plot line or the Reek plot line. I like how we're starting to actually discover the magic that Bran was foreshadowed to have in the first book. It's something like in the first book, it feels so weird because there's no real follow-up to it, right? It's like Bran has this really weird dream it's a chapter I don't really like in book 1. It was my least favorite of the whole book, which was Bran 3, where he has his dream. But I look at that and I'm like, okay, there wasn't really any follow-up to it until the very end of the story where Bran has this dream, all that stuff. And so I like that we start to develop that with interesting characters like Jojen and Mira, and you have more of this conversation of like, is magic real? Are you on the Maester and Maester Luwin's side, or are you on Jojen and Mira's side for Bran? I like that. And I think that Bran as a character, the problem that we had with Bran in book 1 was he didn't really get developed much. It was a lot of the characters around him were getting developed, like Robb and all of that stuff. But book 2, because Robb is gone, Bran is allowed to be able to develop more. And so his feelings about being crippled, and his feelings about magic, and his feeling about his role in society and how he's dealing with those kind of things. I think that George does a better job of Bran in book 2. I don't think that Bran 2 is bad in book 2. I think a lot of people think he is horrible in book 2. I don't think that at all. I think he's as good as he is in book 1 at this point of the story? Probably not, because Bran, he does have the POVs of Robb, so that does help him in book 1. But I think like overall as a POV, Bran is actually in a better place in book 2, just not as interesting. Again, he's kind of isolated. He can't leave Winterfell, all this kind of stuff. Like, it just makes it to where he's a POV that, once again, is kind of away from the main story. Where Clash of Kings thrives is in the main plot line of the War of the Five Kings. Any of the plot lines surrounding that are where this book thrives. So whether it's Catelyn, Tyrion, Theon, those are the ones where this book succeeds, right? Arya, like that is where this book succeeds. Davos, the prologue with Crescent, all of those are where this book succeeds. Let me give it back to chat before we talk about more of the positives. I think that I talked a lot about the negatives because I wanted to address some of the criticism the book has, and you can even see that in the first half specifically. Game of Thrones works as a standalone. It's good even if you ignore the rest of the series. Yeah, Game of Thrones, I think, is the only book that's like that. I think Game of Thrones of the main series is the only one that you could read as a one novel, and it's a complete, all the character arcs pay off. Everything kind of ends in a nice little bow. I don't really think any book in the series does that as well as the first book does. Agreed, Tommy. Like, we see Arya, like, seeing more of the brutality of war, hearing people scream at night, seeing, villages being burned in the middle of the night. I don't think Dany kills the book. She has 4 chapters in the book, so it's not like she's a lot in this book anyway. And her final 2 chapters are great anyway. Does she only have 4? I thought she had 5 in book 2. Hold on. Dany, A Clash of Kings. I might be misremembering, but I thought she had 5. Yeah, so she has 5 chapters in book 2. I really don't remember Daenerys 3 all that well, so I'm gonna go back just to kind of give you guys a refresher, because this is how I feel about Daenerys. She just she's not the most memorable. So again, a lot of chapter 3 is a lot about more of the developing of other characters, like Zaro. You have Quaithe doing the stuff that possibly she needs to go to a shy, and a lot of more prophecy stuff. And then again, there's just not much here. There's just not a lot here. Just reading through the plot synopsis, not much truly happens. So that's probably why, PK, you probably don't remember it as much. I don't remember it as much. I think we're going to be at Dany 3 here soon. Just a chapter, not much happens really. Clash with the Arya stuff is echoed in Feast of the Riverlands. Yeah, Arya is really our look into the war, like from the actual on ground idea of it, really, for book 2 and book 3. So somebody takes that role, which is then Brienne. I think Arya is a top 4 Song of Ice and Fire character. I definitely get that. The Red Wastes feel like the desert itself to read. Agreed. I have Discord muted. Fair enough, Dakota. I'd rather have a... Okay. I'd rather have a season or a session with Ramsay than watch the prequels. I hate them. It's the worst thing humanity has ever done. I know a lot of people don't like the prequels, but I don't have that sentiment. I think the prequels do a lot of good things. I think they have a lot of flaws. Don't get me wrong. I think that the dialogue's not great in the prequels at times. But I think the prequels are pretty solid. Like overall, the narrative is pretty solid. Will Journey of Spring be easier to write than Winds? It's hard to speculate on that, Dan, because it would depend where Winds like ends. Like if Winds ends in the way that we think it should, so like all these players are set up for the war with the others, and then in the last book, all that stuff, then yes. But I don't know, right? Because I still think that realistically another book needs to be added. We don't care about Jorah the creep. It's true. It gets worse in A Storm of Swords, but yeah, I agree. Matthew, I'm gonna let chat answer that. I don't want to get too off of topic. I do want to get through the stream quite efficiently, because I need to go back and dog sit. But yeah. Speaking of creeps, where's JC today? I don't know. JC, maybe he might be busy. I don't want it is up there with I don't like sand in terms of terrible. Okay, I don't like sand though is ironically a good line. It's so fun to meme in that quote. That's the thing with the prequels. They also got they got good memes. They got great memes. You need more than 2 books. Danny has so much she has to do. Agreed. I very much agree with that sentiment. I think that Daenerys needs more time. And the problem with giving Daenerys more time is that if you give her more time, what is the other characters around her going to be doing? I don't know. Phantom Menace is God tier. The other two are mid, but the ending of Revenge of the Sith is good. So this is the way I look at the prequels. I think Revenge of the Sith is the best Star Wars movie, like pretty clearly to me. I know it's biased because I grew up with the prequels, but in terms of the music, the overall plot, emotion, like Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion, is the best Star Wars movie. I can see why people like Empire Strikes Back more, but I think Revenge of the Sith is the best. And then I think Phantom Menace is really good as well. I really love Phantom Menace a lot because of Darth Maul. I generally like the political story, even though it's not that, like, this is what gets me really confused. People don't like Phantom Menace because it's very political or whatnot, but there isn't really that much of, like, politics you need to understand. It's pretty, like, straightforward. Like, compared to something like Andor, it has not nearly as much politics, but people love, like, Andor and, like, oh, we understand Andor, but we don't understand Phantom Menace. Like, I've heard people say, oh yeah, I just don't get the politics going on in Phantom Menace. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. You're just, I don't know what to tell you. Like, go watch the movie again. I don't know. Phantom Menace to me, I would probably have it in my top 5 Star Wars movies, but it'd probably be like number 5. I think my movies are probably Revenge of the Sith, Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One. It's either, I think, A New Hope and Phantom Menace are tied. And then it would be Return of the Jedi after that. Attack of the Clones is... I want to make a video on this on my second channel. I just haven't gotten around to it. But, like, Attack of the Clones is one of those movies that, like, had so much potential. But it just... the Anakin side of things was not good until we get to Tatooine. Once you get to Tatooine and Anakin's like arc, Anakin's good. Like his whole arc past, that's fine. It's just, man, it is hard to rewatch those cringy dialogue scenes, and there's like no chemistry between Anakin and Padme, or Hayden and Natalie Portman. But yeah, I think Obi-Wan's arc for the most part is pretty solid throughout. Like I think the thing that really holds Attack of the Clones back is that it's trying to do so many things that it doesn't do any of the other things like well. Like, and I feel bad because I think there should have been 4 movies in the prequels, because the problem with Attack of the Clones is the Padme and Anakin arc is so important, because that's what's inevitably going to turn Anakin to Darth Vader. So you have to have a big focus on it. But at the same time, you're also trying to build up the Clone Wars, what Dooku and Sidious have been doing in the background. You have to have the start of the Clone Wars. You also should, the movies don't do this, you should be like, okay, what are the Separatists? What do they want? Like, why are they rebelling against the Republic? We never get that answer in the movie. So yeah, I think Attack of the Clones had a lot of stuff going on that it didn't execute any of it necessarily that well. But yeah. Enough Star Wars talk. I've been defending the phrase for years. You think I can't defend Rise? Oh God, Dakota, if you start like defending Rise of Skywalker, I may have to unmod you. That's no hate to anybody that likes the sequels, but why? It goes back to the common quote. You're free to have your opinions, but your opinions are probably wrong sometimes. That's not the exact quote. That was paraphrasing, but, you know. Okay, so moving on. Let's get to the good POV. So I talked about Arya enough already, so I'm not going to talk about her. I haven't talked about Tyrion at all. So Tyrion goes from a character that was pretty interesting in Game of Thrones, but he just didn't have the most interesting stuff going on around him, especially the first half of the book. Like, Tyrion doesn't really get going until like his trial by combat at the Eyrie and that section of the story. That's when he starts going, where Tyrion is able to start using his wits and his cleverness, all that kind of stuff. We get the Battle of the Green Fork, which is great, him being named Hand of the King, all that stuff. It perfectly blends into Tyrion, where he just takes over this book. His political maneuvering is so interesting to watch. Every single chapter has Tyrion doing some sort of like plot that's fantastic, whether it's, you know, trying to make alliances and telling, you know, Varys, Littlefinger, and Pycelle all different things to figure out who's untrustworthy, whether it's him poisoning Cersei so that he can do some, you know, action that just takes her out, whether it's getting rid of Janis. Like, he just has so many great and memorable moments from this book, especially in the first half, and that's going to continue on in the second half as well, that he's just so interesting. Tyrion carries this book a lot of the times. Like, I don't want to say that because like Tyrion is why this is my favorite book. It's not that, but Tyrion does a lot of the legwork. For all the gripes I have with like the other 3 characters I talked about, Bran, Jon, and Daenerys are the weak points of the book. Tyrion like carries them kicking and screaming. Like, he's just fantastic. I think that Tyrion's stretch from the first chapter of A Clash of Kings to his last chapter of A Storm of Swords, it's like just peak writing. And A Clash of Kings, in my opinion, I'd probably say it's better than A Storm of Swords for me personally on his arc, but he's fantastic. I love everything we get with Tyrion throughout the entire first half of the book. Davos, for the first half, he only has 1 chapter, which is so surprising to me, because I feel like when I don't read A Clash of Kings for a long time, I forget like how little he's actually in the book. Like, he only has 3 chapters, which is crazy. And a lot of that is because of the show. The show combines a lot of, you know, the Stannis stuff. So like, for instance, Davos' first chapter and Crescent and the prologue are combined into 1 chapter or 1 section of the story in the show. I love the Stannis plotline. Like, anything that Stannis is involved in this book, in A Clash of Kings, is fantastic. Whether that's the prologue, and the prologue is super long, But when you're reading it, it doesn't feel that long because Crescent himself is a great, interesting character. We're going to get introduced into Melisandre, who's a great supporting, character. Stannis is basically like Stannis and Tyrion really are. Stannis, Tyrion, and I'd say Catelyn are the main characters of book 3. And Stannis is just such an interesting character. His background, everything about that. And this book is where we kind of just explore that. Whether it's through Davos's eyes, Crescent's eyes, Catelyn's eyes, through Renly, through Tyrion and Cersei. It's so fascinating, the character that the book builds. And they do it, and George does it in such a small amount of time. Like, Davos and Crescent are not a large part of this book, but yet, when we do get them, we get so much background information. And so George builds up Stannis as one of the main characters very subtly while also moving the plot along. At no point do we stop and just have a filler chapter just about, oh, this is how Stannis did this or whatever when he was younger. It's all moving the plot forward. And that kind of leads into Catelyn a little bit, but Catelyn then has some of the most interesting chapters. And again, I'm going to tell you guys something. And this is also going to play into a video I have for this week coming out. But for me, throughout the first half of the book, Catelyn only has 4 chapters. And it's kind of weird because Catelyn 1 and Catelyn 2 are very spread apart. Like they are very far apart. And it makes sense. Catelyn's traveling. But we come back to her and we get chapter 2 for Catelyn, chapter 3, and then chapter 4 for Catelyn in a row. Like, they are all within, 10, 15 chapters. And all 3 of them are the best of the book. For where we are in the story right now, halfway through, I have Catelyn 3 as number 1, Catelyn 4 as number 2, Catelyn 2 as number 3. I have Catelyn's chapters, at the very top of this book. She's fantastic. Whether it's her as a POV and the inner conflicts that I think are fantastic with the character, or whether it's the settings she's in, starting in Robb's camp, then she's going to Renly's camp, then she's meeting Renly and Stannis, and how awesome Renly's Peach's chapter is, going so far as to build both of their characters. Catelyn is our main POV into who Renly is, post-Ned. And that's fascinating. Building the character of Stannis for somebody that's more of a neutral position, right? Not like a Davos or a Crescent. It's fantastic to see Stannis and Renly and Catelyn at work. And then you have Renly's death. And so I just think that Catelyn is a great POV, also in a great spot. Because then she's going to go back to the Riverlands, and we haven't gotten this far yet in the reread, but she's just fantastic. And so again, I look at the main reasons why I love A Clash of Kings. It comes down to the dominant POVs. It comes down to Tyrion, Arya, Catelyn, and the Stannis plot attached to Catelyn, right? Like Davos, Crescent, and with that, with Tyrion as well. Stannis' plot is with the best POVs. So for me, that's kind of the way I look at it. Like Theon he's not in that category of the great POVs of the book, but he's also not in that category of underwhelming. Theon is just a character that he's still being built up. And we only have Theon as a POV in 2 books. And of course, his 5th book is the best, right? But him in book 5, he is one of the best POVs of any book in the series. But book 2 is a lot about building that up and subtly building Theon as a character. We don't spend a whole lot of time with him, but when we do, it's very interesting. The setting for him is really interesting. So that's kind of the way I'm kind of looking at A Clash of Kings right now. I think that A Clash of Kings is a much different change of pace book than book 1. Whereas book 1 felt like a more narratively constructed, normal type of book, book 2 is very different. Book 2 has all of its great chapters throughout it. So you don't have to go up to this huge build up for book 2 to get to your best chapters. You're kind of sprinkled throughout the whole book. And I think when you get to really around the 40% of the way through A Clash of Kings is really where A Clash of Kings hits its stride. It's really where the War of the Five Kings starts to kick off. When you start having the plot lines of Stannis and Renly, the other kings, start progressing, right? This whole war we've been talking about, this is where it starts to get moving. It's like for the dance, it's kind of like, okay, after Luke dies to Aemond, that's kind of how it feels. It kind of feels like, okay, this is the start of it now. This is the start of the true conflict. And that's kind of the way I look at Clash of Kings. And so A Clash of Kings remains still my favorite book. I think it'll probably stay that way throughout the reread as we go on. But yeah, I've been really enjoying it. So that's kind of my thoughts on Clash of Kings. Let me finish up, maybe respond to anything chat wants to talk about before we get out of here. And yeah. Let me get back to where we were. We're still talking about Star Wars in chat, which is crazy. This is how much a Clash of Kings sucks. We'd rather discuss Star Wars. Here's all I'll say about Star Wars. I will say, Star Wars, maybe it's making its way back in. You know, Andor is fantastic. So maybe. I wish they kept Maul, have him escape after killing Qui-Gon and replace Count Dooku with him. It could have made Obi-Wan's story more interesting. Matt, I think that's a great idea. I've never heard anybody say that, but like, I love Count Dooku. I love him as a villain. The problem is the movies don't really develop him. We don't know any, like, that's the issue. And that's another issue that the movies have. Like, with movie 1, it makes sense that Maul is not a developed character. He's not meant to be a developed character. He's meant to be the villain, the guy that's the pawn for Palpatine. But the problem you get to is you can't do the same thing when you go to Dooku, because Dooku is the leader of an entire rebellion that's going to cause this entire Clone Wars. Dooku never really gets any development. He's just a bad guy. Like, that's just all he is, right? Like, there's no development with Count Dooku within the films. That's where the TV shows come in. That's where the books come in. And whereas, yes, I'm reading Yoda, the Dark Rendezvous book. I love Count Dooku in the book. He's one of the most interesting characters in Star Wars in terms of the extra content. But in the movies, he's not great. So if we did make Maul the main villain of movie 2 as well, we continue on with that trend, I think it would have helped, because Maul, you already have him established. Like, he is a person. So now you can actually maybe give him more scenes where you're developing him as a character, maybe his background, stuff like that. Definitely probably could have helped. But I do understand, like I think Count Dooku, great character. I know what George Lucas's vision for Dooku was. It just, he didn't really have the time to throw it in there. And that's I kind of think the issue. Did anyone watch Clone Wars? That's what made me love the prequels more. So I haven't like actually watched fully through every plotline of the prequels, or not the prequels, the Clone Wars. The thing I do with the Clone Wars is, if I'm interested in a certain character that is like more developed in Clone Wars, I will like watch their sections of the story. Like, I know Maul's story throughout all of Clone Wars because I think he's the most interesting character of the Clone Wars. Outside of probably Ahsoka, like I think him and Ahsoka are really cool in the Clone Wars. Clone Wars is just tough because I think the first couple seasons just, like, there's good episodes peppered in there, but it's just not like, it doesn't like hit the more mature audience. It's very much feels like for kids the first couple seasons. So that's kind of my issue with the Clone Wars. I do love the show though, overall though. Hot take: Jar Jar is not a bad character. See, this is something I also think is weird. Jar Jar is a character in Phantom Menace, and really the prequels as a whole, who has very limited, like, screen time. He's not a character on screen all that much. Like, if you go back and rewatch Phantom Menace, he just doesn't have that much screen time. Like, yeah, he does have screen time, and that really sticks out in your brain. You remember, oh, all these Jar Jar scenes, which is like, he's there for comic relief. He's there for kids. I was a kid. That's why I don't mind Jar Jar that much. You gotta like keep that, like, I don't know. I think the whole like, oh, I hate Phantom Menace because of Jar Jar is like, Jar Jar is not in the film that much. Like he's not. Like, once they get to, like, I don't know. It's a whole thing, but I don't know. I think Jar Jar is fine in Phantom Menace. I think it's very overblown. Eric loves Clash so much for one reason: his king crush on Stannis. Well, I do like book 2 because of Stannis, because he is a main character. A lot of the book focuses on Stannis, whereas book 1 doesn't, because he's not even in it. And then book 3, he's more definitely in the sidelines. He's much more in the back burner, and then he kind of picks up again in book 5. I do love him as a main character in this book, and I find that anything attached to that plot line is just fantastic. I don't know about that, Dakota. I don't think that Clone Wars and Rebels are necessary for watching Andor and Kenobi. Like, Andor makes complete sense, even if you've never watched Rogue One. Like, it makes complete sense to me. I've never watched Rebels. I know Darth Maul's storyline in Rebels, but I didn't care about Rebels. You don't really need to. And also, you shouldn't even bother watching Kenobi because it's a bad show. So watch Andor, don't watch Kenobi. It's just dog shit. Dakota, I don't know how you liked Kenobi. Like, that show was just terrible. I'm happy you liked it, but like, seeing Leia outrun full-grown men trying to capture her is crazy. Leia as a character, I mean, so many issues. Kenobi as a character just doesn't make any sense. He is a person that is trying to, again, if you're basing it off of the end of Revenge of the Sith, which the movie definitely tries to do, Revenge of the Sith ends on the note of, okay, Obi-Wan, you're going to train Luke at some point. You need to look over him. Obi-Wan Kenobi takes this as, I'm going to be completely disconnected from the Force. How are you going to train Luke then? It makes no sense. Luke almost being assassinated by Reva, and then Kenobi lets her go with the knowledge that she knows that Luke, like, so much I hate about that show. Like, I genuinely think it's it might be the worst, outside of like Book of Boba Fett, the worst Star Wars content out there. Like, the sequels are bad as well, but boy, that show. The only good things about Kenobi is like the last face-off with him and Darth Vader, but I don't think, like, Darth Vader and Kenobi do not need to like face off. Like, they just don't. Like, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of them meeting regardless, but here's my problem though. Like, with the comment of Kenobi was decent, get rid of Reva and focus more on Obi-Wan and Vader's dynamic, it would have been perfect. The problem is Reva is the main villain of the show. Like, Darth Vader is not in the show that much. So the idea of like, oh, let's just focus on the thing that barely is in the show. Well, yeah, but that's just not the case. I do agree, Ghost, that like Andor, I don't think it'll save Star Wars, but I think it could maybe change the trajectory. But well, I think the issue with The Mandalorian is I just don't think that the Mandalorian show, I don't know. I'm not a big Mandalorian person. Like in terms of the show with Grogu and all that. Like, I liked season 1. I thought it was fine. Just never hooked me. I know people say good things about season 2. Some people say bad things about season 2. And then some people say a lot of bad things about season 3. I don't know. I don't really care too that much about it. Hi, Euron. How are you? I'll never forgive the fandom for the terrible treatment of the prequel actors, young Anakin, Jar Jar, and yeah, agreed. They deserve better. I mean, again, Anakin, or the kid, Jake Lloyd, who played Anakin, was a kid. I mean, and I don't even think he acted badly in the movie. I think it's a lot of the dialogue George Lucas gave him, and you can only do so much if you have bad dialogue. Hayden Christensen is a good actor. Like, I think he acted what George Lucas wanted very well. Like, we all look at Anakin and we go, oh, he's this emotional, whiny teenager and all that stuff. That is what George Lucas wanted. Like, Hayden Christensen did everything George wanted the character to be. We might have our gripes with that. And honestly, I think it makes sense the way Hayden Christensen played Anakin, even if it's not that entertaining to see on screen. Like him, like, just think about this. He's a teenage kid, and he's being sent on a solo mission with the love of his life. And he's not supposed to have any attachments. He never talks to women. Like, I don't know. I thought this was about Game of Thrones. I mean, we kind of already got through the whole topic. So if you would like to go back and rewatch, we're kind of at the end of the stream. We're just talking about stuff with chat, but yeah. Clash of Kings discussion over. Yeah, for the most part, I don't have much else to say on it. Just in terms of, it's my favorite book. I've gone through its strengths, its weaknesses, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely give Andor a watch. Or a wash. Watch. Why can't I speak? True, Maz. True. I agree. But that is where I'm going to end stream, guys. I hope you guys all enjoy the little Clash of Kings talk. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.